So speaking of this, obviously you got into it pretty young, and in general, just did it for a long time. You've been to a lot of races. Is there any, I don't know, is there any just crazy stories or or situations you've gotten into? I mean, I think there's a few I can account off the top of my head where I think you said you ran into some wildlife at some races, um, and just stuff like that. Is there any just stories from being around it for so long that I don't know, you feel like would be interesting to tell?
I mean, one time it was in West Virginia. It was the North American Spartan Race Championship, and I was running it, and it was I think 10 miles into it, and all of a sudden I felt like a giant, like it felt like someone stabbed me, and then I felt another stab. Maybe it wasn't as bad as a stab, but it hurt, and basically I ran into a giant. There was a swarm of wasps, swarming the trailhead, and I ran straight into it, and I got stung like 5 times. That sucked. But I feel like another interesting story, or I guess an interesting event that is very close to my heart because it it was just awesome. Is called the Gauntlet. It's in Georgia, so it's not like a Spartan race. It's an endurance event. It's a 30 plus hour endurance event. So it's sort of like a boot camp shoved into 30 to 40 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so my first one, it was in the winter, and it was cold. It's very cold. I think I was 15. I think I was 15 or 16. I want to say 15. But um so going through the whole event, it was very challenging, and like I can't even remember everything we did. Um but at the end of it, and they don't tell you when the end is, but so it's like 38 hours into 37 or 38 hours into this, and you're not allowed to sleep during it, and we all had a goose egg that we had to get at the very beginning of the race. We had to take all our clothes off and jump in this pond
Whoa, wait a
and
second.
swim across to. Yeah, okay, I'll back up. So at the start of this event, the first thing was we all had to do. I think it was as a team we had to do 1,000 burpees together. Um, and so one person would do like 10, 20 burpees, and then the next person would do 10 or 20 burpees. But while we were doing that, one at a time, we had to jump into this pond, swim across, grab this tin can that was filled with, it was like a goose egg, a plastic baggie full of something, and something else. And then we had to swim back. And it was cold, like snow was on the ground. And it was, I forget what time it was, but it was dark. It was not warm whatsoever. Um, and so like you're allowed to jump in with your clothes on, but that's not a smart idea because then you're just spending the rest of the time super wet, and you would just get really cold and get hyperthermia. Uh, so
We'll
I
get to
stripped
that
all my
later.
clothes off. Yeah, yeah. So I stripped all my clothes off, jumped in, and I actually almost drowned because I freaked out because of the cold water. I guess I've always never been good with cold water.
Yeah, I guess so.
Um, but so at the end of the event, that goose egg, we had to start a fire with flint and steel and boil the goose egg. And I'm not the smartest guy, and I'm really not smart. Like 40 hours into an event, and so
Oh,
I forgot how to boil an egg.
oh my lord. Well, you were
And
the
so I
top of
put
your
the
class.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so I put this egg in the water. It starts like the water starts boiling, and I look up to the cryptea, and I'm like, "This means it's boiled, right? Because the water's boiled, so the egg is like cooked, right?" And the lady's like, one way to find out, Noah. And she
Oh
just like
no.
shakes her head. I'm like, okay. So I dump the water out. I take the egg out. I like crack it a little bit. It's definitely not cooked. I'm like, shoot. So I have to put it back in there, cook it again. And like I did this like 3 times, just taking it in and out. And finally I cooked it. It
You
wasn't hard
cracked it
boiled.
too?
I cracked it, yeah.
Oh no.
But it was the best egg I've
Could you
ever
have just
had. It was
at that point you should have just been like, "Can I make a poached egg?" and just like freaking cracked it into the
Oh no,
boiling
it
water.
actually was poached. It
It
was
was
finally just
basically
like a
poached.
poached
Yeah.
egg.
Makes sense.
It was like it was cooked on the outside, but the inside was runny. But it tasted amazing.
You're like, "What?
It,
Does this count?"
I no, I actually said that exact thing. I'm like, does this count? And the cryptator, she just like smiled and said, sure. And then I ate the egg, and man, I was great.
I was gonna say most people, I guess, don't totally know what you do in these races. I mean, I know just from obviously listening to stories and whatever else and seeing stuff. So obviously, I think some people have heard of Spartan races or Tough Mudders, but I mean, I know in some, especially like the endurance events, you've talked about how like you've had to carry like PVC pipe full of rocks and random stuff like
That
that,
one
and
sucked.
or a backpack full of shit and whatever else, and or obviously doing the regular obstacle course races where it's kind of like a boot camp situation where it's muddy and like crawling through
Hmm.
mud under wire or something along those lines, or climbing over a wall. I was gonna say, is there anything like, obviously that one is definitely very unique, I feel like, for a race, is to well, that wasn't a part of the race, was it? The boiling of the egg. It was like,
So yeah, that wasn't
that was
necessarily a
just at the
race.
end.
That's more of an event. So those, I would qualify those as like extreme endurance events,
Yeah.
if you will. And so those aren't technically races. Like
Yeah,
those
it's a
are,
little different because that stuff isn't timed. Like first one done wins. It's more of a, this
yeah.
is how
I
long
mean,
it takes.
so
This is everything you got to do. Everybody
yeah,
like,
it's a
yeah.
like they have a like so throughout the 30 plus hours, and they have this for basically each like endurance event is they have time hacks, and so they'll give us like okay, you need to run to this place, and you have this amount of time. Then they usually don't tell you what time you have, and so you just gotta book it to this next place and hope you make it in time.
Mm-hmm.
And some people they don't make it in time, and then they get cut, and so they can't keep going. And so it's always kind of like racing against the clock,
Yeah,
or
it's a different scenario than like a regular Spartan race or something like that. Yeah, it's
yeah, exactly.
structured differently.
Yeah, the Spartan Race Hurricane Heats, they've now kind of changed the format to where it's a point system. So each event that you do in the like 12 hours, you get an amount of points. And at the end, if you don't have enough points, you get cut. Or and you can always just tap out during the in the middle of the event, which a lot of people do. Um, so yeah, that's kind of how they're structured.
Okay, fair enough. I was gonna say the, at least the story I remember you telling about, the one I was kind of referencing with the wildlife, was, I think there was one, I can't remember where you said you were. I think it was like South Carolina, North Carolina. It was one of the Carolinas. I know there's two.
Oh,
Um,
with the bears?
yeah, the bears, and then I think deer as
Oh yeah,
well.
that was an endurance event or an obstacle course race actually.
What was that one?
That was my first that's technically my first ultra marathon without obstacles. It was a
Mm.
super fun race too. Because it was super unique where they had a bunch of different trails. So they had I think like 5 different trails, and basically it was a 60-mile race. Like each trail back and forth was just 60 miles. But you had to roll a dice, and whatever your dice landed on is the trail that you had to go down. And to finish the race, you had to complete each trail going both ways because they each trail had two ways to do it. Um, and you had 24 hours to do this. So a lot of people they rack up 100 miles just trying to get each trail. And so a lot of times you're just doing the same trail over and over and over again because you keep rolling the same thing. Um,
Oh,
but
damn.
unfortunately, I didn't get the full 24 hours. Like I was at 66 miles. I had like two more trails to do, and I was trying to roll it. Um, but a mama bear was on the trail and kept on growling at racers as they were going past because it was like midnight, so we couldn't see. We just kept hearing growling, and eventually one of the
Yeah,
racers saw like
just keep running past them. It's fine.
just keep running. Like it just makes you run faster.
I
Saw
guess
like a
so.
bunch of cubs, and so they had to stop the race, which I was very sad about because I was in second place and I was only a couple miles behind the leading guy,
Yeah.
and man, that was a really fun one.